following is my own true story from my personal experience. It did not speak on behalf of the United States Marine Corps or any other U.S. Marine. This is my own story. If your experience is different, I can't speak on that.
In the Marines, we have what is called the Marine Corps Martial Arts Program, also called MCMAP, and also what we jokingly refer to as McNinja. Now, within this program, you have different color belts for different levels, and in order to belt up, you have to go through a culminating event. Think of it as a final challenge. In this video, I will be talking about how I got my green belt and specifically how it involved me getting jumped by 6 grown-ass men, which got a little nutty. And so before we get into the story, this is episode 10 of Marine Corps Chronicles, and I just want to give a big thanks to all of you out there for supporting this channel and hitting 60k subs. And since I am now in the double digits for this series, I also want to take a brief moment to answer the question that I get from time to time, which is, should you join the military? And to that I have to say, I cannot make that decision for you. However, I do suggest doing one thing before you make that decision, which is to read War is a Racket, which is written by one of the most highly decorated Marines of all time, 2-time Medal of Honor recipient, and 34-year veteran, Major General Smedley Butler. And by read, I don't mean sit in a cafe and performative read 2 pages in 2 hours with a matcha next to you. I mean actually read the motherfucking book. And it's not a long or hard read either. It's like 35 pages, which you can easily read in one sitting. Okay, I don't want to go that far. I know everyone is at like different reading levels and stuff. But anyways, it's seriously worth a read, whether you want to join the military or not. I will link it down below. I make these videos because 1, I enjoy making them, 2, I think many out there enjoy watching them, and 3, this was a chapter of my life, and as I get older, my memories of my time in the Marines will fade, and so it is nice to have my experiences down in video format. And so with that being said, let's get into the story of how I got jumped by 6 men, but first I need to set the scene. There was a time in the Marines where you could be any rank and belt up to any belt, as long as you met the requirements of learning a certain set of techniques, a certain amount of physical fitness / sustainment hours, blah blah blah. A good chunk of the time I was in the Marines, the Marine Corps had actually gotten rid of this system. Why? I think they were tired of having lance corporals with black belts mogging the second lieutenants, and so they implemented a system where you have to be a certain rank in order to earn a certain belt. For example, as a lance corporal, you could only go up to a green belt, while as a sergeant, you could go up to a black belt. And in order to belt up, you need to be taught by a Marine Corps martial arts instructor, and you could tell who they are because they usually have what is called a tab on their belt. A tan tab makes you a martial arts instructor, meaning that you can belt up other Marines to whatever belt you have currently, while red tabs means that you can be the instructor for the instructor. And you can have up to 6 red tabs, although I've actually never really seen anybody with 6 red tabs before while I was in. I'm pretty sure they kept those Marines locked up in a shipping container to unleash as needed. I have never been a MCMAP instructor, and I actually left the Marines with the 2nd highest belt as a sergeant, a brown belt. Anyways, these belts were not just eye candy, so you felt like a real motivator. The level of martial arts belt directly contributed to your ability to be promoted. While this is a whole entire topic, just know that belts give you a certain amount of points towards promotions, and promotions are determined on whether or not you meet a cutting score that is released monthly. And so what this means and why I am talking about all this is that not being able to belt up wasn't just some sort of boo-hoo, you don't have eye candy on your waist. It literally sabotaged your chances for promotion. Fast forward to when this story takes place, I was stationed in Myanmar a little bit after the height of COVID, and during this time, I and a group of Marines could not find any martial arts instructors to belt us up. There were plenty of instructors on Myanmar, but they already had classes going on, and because this was around COVID time, classes had to be smaller in size, and so the instructors who could teach classes usually prioritized belting up the guys they were familiar with first in their own sections before taking on other students. I was in communications, specifically as a field radio operator, and there was a sergeant in my section who was a martial arts instructor, but I'm just gonna put it bluntly, dude did not want to belt us up. I and a group of Marines who desperately wanted to belt up would be on our hands and knees begging this guy to belt us up, and he would always have some sort of reason for why he couldn't. Family issues, COVID, administrative stuff he had to take care of, etc, etc. And while I'm not gonna call him a liar, as I'm sure he did have personal stuff going on that he had to take care of, dude edged us so hard by making it sound like next week or next month he would be hosting classes, while when that time did come around, nothing would happen. Again, getting belted up wasn't some sort of trivial flex, it was actually needed if we wanted the best chance of getting promoted. And so someone higher in the chain of command finally noticed that all the Marines were begging for martial arts instructors, and then we were told that if we wanted to get belted up, MCRD San Diego, yes, the place where recruits go for boot camp, or at least half of recruits go, would be hosting open classes in their dojo for us due to the special circumstances of COVID. Just to be clear, we were not going to get classes side by side with recruits. At MCRD San Diego, there isn't just recruits and drill instructors when it comes to military personnel. There is also permanent personnel there, responsible for administrative duties and other stuff, and so they would also need to get belted up at the dojo, the same place we were about to go. What this also meant is that we were going to get instructed by actual drill instructors, which also means that we were going to get the full Marine Corps martial arts experience. You see, while there are certain requirements, like a list of techniques to learn in order to get to your next belt level, every martial arts instructor has their own discretion for how exactly they want to teach. Some instructors just run down the list and check off all the boxes, while others make it a full immersive experience. And I am happy to say that while I perchance almost got my asshole torn in two by attending these MCMAP classes with drill instructors, they were fun as hell. Our MCMAP drill instructors were genuinely great teachers. Every single one of them didn't just do Marine Corps martial arts, they also came from some background of Muay Thai in forms of kickboxing, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, wrestling, and a combination of all of the above. And what made everything really stand out was just how much they emphasized sparring. We would be grappling or striking every day we had class, but more so we would come up with these insanely fun scenarios where it might be a 2v1 but a guy gets a knife, or maybe a 2v1 but the alone guy is a 400-pound mass of muscle. Physical conditioning was also a huge part of our instruction. We would be doing log drills, obstacle courses, various runs and other exercises that made us feel like puking, but the philosophy of this was, according to the words of my drill instructor, you haven't learned how to fight until you can fight tired. My favorite MCMAP activity in general was bayonet drills and sparring. Okay, I know that isn't really relevant in modern day combat, but it is incredibly fun charging down a makeshift trench trying to beat each other up with pugil sticks. Pugil sticks, by the way, were these padded sticks that simulated both the bayonet end and the butt of a rifle, so that you can use both ends of a simulated rifle with a bayonet without actually ripping out someone's windpipe or bashing someone's brains in. And the best part about bayonet fighting is that when we did multiple people in teams of two, you really get a sense of just how chaotic bayonet fighting would have been historically, because one moment you're tunnel visioned fighting the guy in front of you, only for the next moment to get rammed by a bayonet by the guy next to him who finished off the buddy next to you. Anyways, for weeks I attended these classes, logging my hours until finally we were ready for the big day. The day where we would earn our green belts, the culminating event. To earn our belts, it was actually a 2-day event. The first day we all lined up and went into the dojo one by one, where the instructors would name a technique for you to do, and then you would do it on a human dummy to, well, prove you can do it. The first day wasn't really anything crazy and just more technical, as it was for the instructors to make sure you checked off all the boxes so that you can proceed to the next day, where a special event was prepared, and only by the end of this event would you be handed your shiny new belt if you made it. The second day I got to class. It was in the middle of summer and the San Diego sun was high in the sky. The first thing we had to do once we stripped down to our boots and utes was log drills. Log drills are when Marines, usually 5 or 6 if I remember correctly, would line up end to end on a heavy ass log, and then we would be forced to perform various stuff like maneuvers, squats, curls, hip thrusts. Okay, maybe not the last part. But the real test for these logs, since they were heavy as fuck, was to promote teamwork. You see, if you stand still and rest the log on your shoulder, it was definitely heavy and you can feel your shoulders going numb. However, the real challenging part was getting these logs place to place while staying coordinated. Because once everyone starts walking, some guys might be out of step, while others might be trying to shift weight off their shoulders, and so then suddenly everyone's trying not to faceplant any dirt or trying not to pass out because 2 of the 6 people on the log are pulling their shoulders away from the log because they can feel their own shoulders giving out. Also, the height difference adds to the stress, because if you're taller than the guys around you, then usually you carried more weight on that log, but also because you can't really make out the legs of the guys in front or behind you, and so people sometimes step on your ankles, and so you're trying your best not to trip over yourself or everyone else. And so the key to doing these log drills is to get a team of people of similar height, and then to have someone, usually in the very far back, call out cadences so that everyone can be in step. And during this event, you can hear people grumbling at each other through gritted teeth and making slick little comments like, stop fucking cheating, get your shoulder back on the log, and many arguments like that would break out. I have no idea how long we actually did this for, as I didn't have a phone or watch on me, but this was just the first event, a warm-up, shall I say. And so the next thing we did was some grappling. We formed a mini circle and the drill instructors hosed down the area with water before each of us took turns grappling one-on-one again and again. This was to test our individual skills, and as the ground became muddy, it kind of felt like I was fighting in the trenches of World War I, and the instructors would deliberately hose down our faces, so it also felt like I was in a Splash Mountain ride. The water and mud was also a nice touch because once it got into your eye, you almost had to strictly rely on feeling your opponent. Okay, that sounds a little bit strange, but not in a suspicious way, alright? But it was really definitely something that you don't get to experience every day, and so this section of the challenge wasn't really that bad, unless you hate grappling or you got paired up with Big Bubba. So now we have tested our teamwork, our individual skills in grappling, and so it was time for more physical conditioning so that when we got to the actual final event, we would be exhausted. The instructors took us to the O course, the exact same one that the recruits used in boot camp, where we had to put on flak jackets while coordinating getting jugs full of water to the other side. So we get to the O course and they made us run that shit over and over again until even the most physically fit in the group were exhausted. The flak jackets actually helped a little just because there's a section on the O course where you have to do a mini jump on a log, and sometimes if you jumped and landed awkwardly, it would either knock the wind out of you or tap your balls. And so the flak jacket was like a little extra layer of protection. At this point, maybe an hour and a half had passed by, and so all of us, covered in water and mud and already tired from all the stuff we did, lined up outside the dojo for the final event. As we all lined up for this event, nobody actually knew what was about to happen. The main dojo doors, which were these heavy set metal doors that had pretty good sound insulation, had been closed, and we could only briefly make out what was going on inside every time the door cracked open and we could hear music being blasted and people screaming. I was maybe about a third from the back of the line, and so as people were going in, a couple of minutes later you would see the previous people emerge from the back door, and it looked like they had just fought hand-to-hand combat against a bear. One of the guys that had left had the neck hole portion of his green skivvy shirt ripped open where it looked like someone was clinging onto it and then yanked down as hard as humanly possible, while another guy that left had a noticeable limp that I'm pretty sure wasn't there before, which meant that some freaky ass shit was going down in there. Now, thoughts are racing through my head. What could they possibly be doing in there? Were they gonna oil me up when I get in there? Were they gonna give me a bayonet and have me time travel to Verdun? Or did they have 3 pit bulls and a lion ready to rip my balls off? I started to get a little squirrely as the guys that came out from the back looked like a nightmare, and since they weren't allowed to talk to us, we just had our imaginations for what was about to happen. And finally, my turn was coming up. The guys at the door signaled me to enter, and as they opened the door, light briefly flooded into the room where I could make out some figures lined up on the wrestling mat, and then I stepped into pitch black. Like I'm talking about in the middle of a forest in the middle of a moonless night dark. I am talking about that time you robbed an ambulance for free tourniquets dark. I went from a bright ass San Diego afternoon to a room with lights that were either dimmed or turned off, which because my eyes weren't dilated yet, they might as well given me blindfolds. The only thing that helped were the dim glow of emergency lights and other electronics along the wall that at least gave me a little indication of where in the room I was. But other than that, I couldn't see shit. And not only that, but the music was blasting and I could not hear anything other than the guy who told me to center myself on the mat before I got in. For this portion of the animation, I'm going to animate these hamsters to where I think everyone was, but I'll let you know at the end how I figured out it was most likely a 1v6. And speaking of a 1v6, the point of this challenge wasn't because they expected you to 1v6 everyone like your Ip Man. The point of this challenge was to show that you have heart, and that when outnumbered, you would still put up a fight even if you were almost certainly, if not definitely, going to lose. In fact, in a 1v6 scenario around people in your weight class, unless you're really that guy or girl or built like Mike Tyson, there are very few people who could fight off that many people. I don't think that's an unrealistic conclusion to draw, but hey, let me know if I'm wrong in that assessment. So as I said before, I already noticed the row of people lined up on the mat when light briefly flooded the room, and it doesn't exactly take a ingenious to figure out that they weren't there to offer me boxes of chocolate. And so as I center myself on the mat, I don't even have time to react or process what was about to happen before I feel a heavy figure slam into my right side, and I immediately feel another figure coming in from my left and what I assume was trying to do like a double leg takedown or something like that. However, because the first guy tackled me so hard, I feel the guy on my left try but fail to grab my legs before I go flying over his back. I am so glad that guy didn't actually securely grab my legs, because if he did, I'm pretty sure I would have been ripped into 2 pieces. The downside was because this guy was essentially a wedge between me and the guy tackling me, I landed extra hard on my back and I got the wind knocked out of me. I don't know if you've ever gotten the wind knocked out of you, but it is definitely a bottom tier experience as far as martial arts goes. When something like that happens, you immediately start gasping for air, sort of like when you're emerging from a swimming pool after holding your breath for as long as you can. And so as I get slammed onto my back, I am clawing for air as I begin to arch my back in order to get the guy who tackled me off of me. And because he went flying over this dude's back with me, he was already kind of half dangling off my body. And so as I arched my back and turned to my stomach, it wasn't that hard. Just as I get to my stomach and begin to push myself up, another body slams into my side and begins driving forward. I only have a brief moment to react and stick out my right arm to prevent myself from getting flipped onto my back, which is what I assumed he was trying to do. I feel my right hand brush against the cold ground that wasn't covered by the wrestling mat and quickly realize that these motherfuckers had launched me nearly out of the map. This was an actual concern because my brain, believe it or not, is not immune to being smashed into tiles, and I don't know if it was intentional or not, but the guy driving me towards the edge of the mat stops what he's doing before I feel another figure start pulling me from the edge of the mat. And by pull, I don't mean he is gently caressing my hand. I mean he is either trying to get me into some kind of rear choke or headlock, and he's yanking me backwards. And so I tuck my chin and I try to turn towards the guy with his hands around my neck and chest. At this point, we are a tangle of arms and legs. There had to be at least 3 other guys immediately around me. And here's the thing, there's not enough physical room for 6 people to go after 1 person. I mean, unless you consider dogpiling them to count. And so what it seemed to me like what they were doing was going 2 or 3 at a time and then rotating people out as needed so that there was always fresh bodies trying to grapple with me. I kind of figured out this was the case because one moment I would hear a bunch of people breathing heavy around me and slowing down, and in the next moment I would be getting slammed into by someone else and they would have the energy of someone who was relatively fresh. At this point, maybe 20 seconds or so had passed. I say maybe because when you're fighting someone, time moves differently. For all those out there that do martial arts, I'm sure you know what I mean. Fighting for someone for 30 seconds feels like 20 minutes. 5 minutes feels like you're fighting for an eternity. And so I managed to break out of this attempted headlock and I get to my knees, where I am then immediately locked up with another person in front of me and behind me. And the guy in front is pushing as hard as he can, while the guy behind me is also pushing as hard as he can. So instead of taking me down, I actually end up getting to my feet because the 2 dudes are unintentionally helping to stabilize my position by pushing on both ends. Just before another person went in for a single leg takedown, or maybe he was going for a double leg takedown. However, because my legs were spread so far apart in order to give myself more stability, he only managed to grab one of my legs. And as I'm trying to get this guy off my feet by attempting to sprawl, although it really wasn't successful because the guy behind me was pushing, the guy behind me lets go. And I'm not sure if he lost his grip or if he was trying to intentionally give the guy doing a single leg more room to maneuver or stuff, but whatever. And the guy in front of me is still pushing crazy hard, and so I go flying backwards again, and now the guy in front of me has so much momentum that he actually goes past my head and knees me in the face and loses his grip, and I start to arch my back again trying to get on my stomach while I feel the other guy who was going for my legs scrambling around. I'm not sure what he's actually doing. He isn't able to grab hold of my legs, probably because I'm also flailing around a little bit. And anyways, I get to my stomach and I try to push my way onto my knees. At this point, things become a blur. I was already tired coming in, and now I'm even more exhausted and I still feel like I'm not getting enough air. I also swear that something wet was touching my face, and I assumed it was blood gushing from my nose since I just got smacked in the face. And so my new plan was to not get on my feet because I knew that if I did, someone would inevitably tackle me, and to instead try to lock up the guy in front of me and use him as sort of like a makeshift tripod, so anyone else tackling me would have to technically bring both of us down. And before I know it, I feel everyone let go of me while some others then reach over and help me stand up. At this point, my eyes were not adjusted yet to the darkness fully, but I could make out distinct shapes and figures, and they tell me to go to the edge of the mat where a bunch of people pat me on the back and the instructor hands me my green belt. While I am still panting and trying to catch my breath, I thank the instructors for hosting such great classes before they open the back door for me. And in that moment, as the room floods with light, I turn around and count 6 figures standing in a line at the mat waiting for the next person, which I assume was also the amount of people that jumped me. As I got out of the dojo with my shiny new green belt, I also got back to my car and looked at myself in the mirror, and it looked like I had just gotten out of bed and was spinning in a washer. I was soaking wet from the grappling and now had weird scratches and later bruises all over my body. Although I thought I had a bloody nose, I wasn't actually bleeding, which I'm not sure if I should be more concerned or less concerned since I did feel something wet and maybe I grabbed someone's balls. The moral of the story. Okay, usually I would insert some kind of joke here, but I'll actually take this moment to give my perspective on fighting in general. I am not here claiming to be some sort of badass. There are plenty of people out there that can kick my ass. I do believe that people should strive to be kind, not saying I am, although I want to be. I do lose my mind from time to time too. However, I am a believer that if someone takes your lunch money, you shouldn't just sit there and do nothing, because I guarantee that person is going to come back the next day and do it again. You should stand up for yourself, and even if you get your ass beat, if you have heart, that person will think twice before taking your lunch money again. I am not condoning mindless violence. I am advocating for self-defense. Plenty of times I call myself a dumbass on this channel for doing dumbass shit. Just as if someone else fucks up, they should also be responsible. The same goes for confrontations. I have also been streamed at many times while I was in the Marines, but if I deserved it, then I give a correction noted, because I deserve that ass chewing, and sometimes an ass chewing is what a person needs to remember a lesson, or else words go into one ear and out the other. And so I think the ultimate lesson from this challenge is to have heart, even if you're going to most likely lose. Thank you for watching and making it to the end. I know many of you enjoy story times in general, so I will have more coming from both my civilian and military life alongside my usual gaming and educational content. Please like and subscribe if your heart desires, and I hope to see you in the next video.